approximately 165,000 Holocaust survivors living in Israel, and last year alone, 15,000 of them passed away. Hello, friends. Hey, Rabbi, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good.
Well,
It's okay to be good on a day when we're remembering something not so good. Because today is, of course, Yom Hashoah, the day of... Now, what is the full English title? It's the day of remembrance and valor? Do you know? Or
and
bravery?
bravery.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
bravery. The day of
Depends on how you define or how you translate gvura.
Gvura, right. Yom Hashoah
Shoah
v'hagvura. Right,
v'hagvura.
right.
Yeah.
And of course, now I know that you have personal connections in your own family to the Shoah, to the Holocaust. Today, we really wanted to dive a little bit into how how do we continue to remember, continue to teach, continue to honor the Shoah when so many of our survivors are dying. I'll just give you that was the numbers I gave before were only in Israel. 165,000 living in Israel, 15,000 died last year. 90% of the Holocaust survivors just in Israel are 80 years or older. 31,000 of them or 19% are over 90 years old. We are not going to have these beloved people for long, forever. And so we want to talk a little bit about what does Holocaust education look like in a post-survivor world. Do you want to, I don't know, do you want to maybe start with just your own personal connection and
Well,
why this is meaningful to you?
of course. Look, my own father-in-law, Rabbi Laszlo Berkowitz, was a survivor of Auschwitz and four other concentration camps. And he died 16 months ago. Our own congregants here at Temple Sinai, Ingrid Roskin, who was a hidden child survivor, uh, died, which means that our congregation only has one individual who can speak, that I know of, who can speak directly to the horrors of the Holocaust. And my dear friend Gary Moss is going to turn 100 in less than 3 weeks. Uh, as much as we would like otherwise, they will be gone. My children's children will not know a Holocaust survivor in the real sense, and
Can I just
we,
pick your brain about what you just said? Because that was really powerful. What does it mean to know a Holocaust survivor? And I guess why is that
right,
important? I mean, right? We
right,
have Stephen what's
Spielberg,
his name? Spielberg, right? We
Spielberg.
have all these testimonials, these video testimonials. We have books. We have museums. Of course, it's important. Of course, every life is important. Every person is important. Why, for Holocaust education and remembrance, is that connection with survivors so vital?
Uh, so you're right. We do have all of that memorabilia, all the written, all the video recordings, audio recordings that are so important. But there is something very real and very powerful when one sits across from a person and can read their eyes, or for that even that matter, can hold their hand and recognize that this is a human being in an age when everything uh, is digital and everything can be created. You can take my face and place it onto anyone else's body digitally. There is a challenge. There is a challenge of people who will say this isn't real. And actually, you mentioned Steven Spielberg just recently. Last month, it was on 60 Minutes that Steven Spielberg Shoah Foundation has started to do interviews, video and audio interviews using AI, artificial intelligence, where they literally will take hundreds of cameras, surround a person kind of in a pod, and then over a week ask something like 2,000 questions of the survivor. And then right there, the man with the green background, he was interviewed over 40, a full week, 2,000 questions. And now you can have, quote unquote, a conversation with him. You can have that conversation with him, and we'll be able to have a conversation with him even after he is no longer with us. Because I can ask a question, the computer will pick up that, will search through the database of answers, and will pick something that is close. Or if you ask him, who won the ball game yesterday, he'll say, well, I can't answer that question. I'm only recording. There is something powerful about being in the presence of individuals. I think about my own experience going on March of the Living with my father-in-law, and how the teenagers doted on him to connect with him, to see him as a real human being, which is so ironic in that why was he doted on? Because people treated him not as a human being. The Nazis treated him otherwise. So we do have, I think, technology that is allowing for that. Yad Vashem scans nearly 20 million documents a year and has accumulated, I think, something around 350,000 hours of audio and video testimony. Right? All of that is going to be digitalized within 4 or 5 years, which will allow us to be able to utilize that. Right? Where I think we're going to have, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, you lost me at this eyewitness. This is unbelievable.
My techie nerdy friend Rabbi David this is the first time you're seeing this.
This is wild. So I typed a question in here. This is available at eyewitness.usc.edu. I put a question in here. Were you in a concentration camp? Hopefully you'll be able to hear the answer. Let's see.
I was sent from the Warsaw Ghetto uprising.
Can you hear that okay?
To Majdanek.
Yeah. I
was in Majdanek for approximately from third week of May to the end of July, beginning of August.
This is just amazing. Holy mackerel.
And Leslie Stahl, who was the 60 Minutes reporter who reported on this effort, could not believe the amount. She asked kind of esoteric questions, and they really had asked so many of him, and it had videotaped so much that there wasn't a question.
I'm asking, do you still believe in God?
Oh,
see if we get an answer.
He has an answer to this.
I believe in God.
Oh
yes,
my goodness.
I believe in a.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
That is stunning. That is absolutely stunning.
So I think that I think that it's such an incredible. This is where technology, I think, will continue to support the memory, and whatever the next technological advancement is. We wish that we had this capacity 50 years ago and could have done, 50 years worth of survivors. We don't. I actually think that that's not going to be the challenge. Okay, we will have the technology, we will have the will, we'll have the money. Okay, because people care about it. To preserve these materials, and with each advancement, that will carry those materials forward. What I think is going to be challenging, one of the challenges is going to be placing that into a context. My concern is that as the Holocaust fades further into the rearview mirror, that we are going to forget to use this material. There will be plenty of it. I mean, right. 350,000 hours of material. There will be millions and millions and millions of documents that will be there. Okay? And if they are held in a storage room, okay, to be preserved and never used, then we will have failed.
Yeah.
I think that we need to do this. I think we need to do it for two reasons. Okay? My first is that we need to continue to preserve the overwhelming evidence that this happened, because the horrible truth is that anti-Semitism continues to rear its head in the world, and there will be plenty of people as the Holocaust fades further and further into history who will deny that it ever existed. Okay? The second is that every generation asks different questions, and every generation is faced with its own moral challenges, and that we need to mine these firsthand accounts, this material, to draw from it lessons and answers that the current moral challenges are presenting to us. Okay? When the concentration camps were liberated and the shocking truth came out, right, there was a collective cry across the world of never again. Right? Beautiful statement. Except the problem with that statement is nobody listened to it, or not enough people listened to it. Because since the end of the Holocaust in 1945, 1946, okay, we have had any number of genocides of other peoples, right? Whether that's Rwanda or Bosnia or Biafra or Guatemala. Right? The message that people are human beings, right, and have an inherent worth, right, and that because you are different does not mean that you are better, or for that matter, that you are less than, right, seems to be forgotten, or it hasn't reached the right ears yet.
Right.
So we need to continue to push this out.
I want to suggest a third reason. And I was reading an article by Israeli Social Justice Minister Meirav Cohen. And Justice Cohen said, there are 2 points that Justice Cohen makes. This is the quote. "Our watch is the last watch, and it comes with great responsibility. The average age of Holocaust survivors is 85. And here's the key. These are the last years we have to serve them, to allow them to age in dignity and also document as many of their stories as possible, because not long from now, there won't be anyone to tell them." The piece that stuck with me about that particular quote is these stories, telling these stories, remembering the Holocaust, is as much for us as students and as those who should learn from the experience as it is for the survivors themselves. This is an act of giving dignity. This is an act of giving kavod, of giving honor to those people, allowing them to tell their stories, allowing them to share their truth. I think there's something really powerful that this isn't. It is, of course, for us, and it is for them.
There's no question about it. I was listening to a podcast actually this morning while I was taking the dog for a walk about a 17-year-old young man in the UK who, with his 97-year-old grandmother, wrote her story. They co-authored a book. And it was not just the story of the Holocaust, because that, of course, is important, but what he gained from it and what his peers gained from it is valuable. And what his great-grandmother gained from it, how close they became working sort of night and day to do this. All of that is true, but I think that that once they're gone, we should care for them as best as we can. Okay? New York, the state of New York just put up a couple $1 million to ensure that Holocaust survivors were being taken care of in their old age. I am in no way saying that is unimportant, but at a certain point, the last survivor will die, and then what? Right? Our education cannot just be while our survivors are living.
And we're going to have to shift how we teach Holocaust once the survivors are gone. Just yesterday, the March of the Living had an article out that they were quoted in this article saying that they're really struggling because they don't have as many survivors who can go on these journeys with them. And so, amazing organizations like March of the Living, who for the past 2 years has not been able to take groups over, they're going to have to find new ways. And what you showed us before from Spielberg's organization is just amazing, but they're going to have to find new ways to engage folks. They only have 8 survivors leading the march this year.
Wow. I mean, and there were on my bus alone when I was on March of the Living, there were 6, I think, 5.
Can I ask you a question about that? So I was actually going to ask you if you've been. I have not been on March of the Living, and I don't know if this is just me or if this is a problem for Holocaust education. I'm afraid to go. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to handle it. I have a hard time going through Yad Vashem in Israel, the Holocaust Museum. I feel like if I went, I would just crumble, and so I'm afraid to go.
There's a lot of tears. There's no question about that. On the other hand, my tears for the week of March of the Living, pales in comparison, to the tears that my father-in-law must have shed, when he arrived at Auschwitz, and then for the next year got shuttled around. I'll tell you the most powerful moment. There were 2 powerful moments on my March of the Living. One was when my father-in-law stood at the Warsaw Ghetto and read a poem that he had wrote himself. He didn't know that I was bringing the poem. I thrust it into his hand and said, here you go. And then even more powerful was when we were at Auschwitz. We walked from the entrance, or the image of in this case, it wasn't Auschwitz, it was Birkenau. But we walked from where the trains came in, okay, all the way to the back, okay, which is where the crematoria were. Okay, and where the gas chambers are just pits in the ground. It's as if you take off your house and all that's left is your basement. And there's a stairway going down, and he stands at the top of the stairs, and it's the end of the day. Right? The sun is starting to set for us. It's got to be about 4. Yeah, we walked from there backwards. Okay, and he stood at the top of the stairs, and he looked over at the trees, and he looked at the sun, and he said, "This was probably the last view that my mother and sisters and brother had." We arrived at Auschwitz late in the day, and my mother and younger siblings were taken immediately. And they stood right there before they went down into the gas chamber. This must have been what their view was. Completely nonchalant, completely without emotion. And everybody else is like completely bowled over by this. Right? He had come to terms with it. Right? We do too. We don't have a choice. We have to. Right? We have to pick up their stories. Right? We have to be emotionally invested. Right? We have to see them as human beings, not as close as the technology can get. Right? For us to feel as if we were there, we want to push that technology. Right?
Yeah.
I think that there's another piece to this. We're talking about what happens when Holocaust, when survivors are no longer here. I think we're going to have a challenge. I think we're going to have a challenge between balancing between the unique and particularistic Jewish experience of the Holocaust and how it gets used in the wider society to reflect other historical horrors or injustices.
Right. You mentioned before, that never remember that we've seen, and I noticed that you didn't say we've seen other Holocausts.
I didn't say that. Yeah, and I'm very conscious of that. That's one where it gets, we want to, we want to respect that the Holocaust was, in really many ways, it was a Jewish experience. On the other hand, it wasn't only. Right? The Nazis killed 11 million people. 6 of them were Jews, but there were 5 million other people. Right? And so I think that we have to balance between the particularistic and the universalist in terms of what we do with the Holocaust. There was a recent Moment magazine article. Michael Berenbaum, the great professor of Jewish studies at American Jewish University in Los Angeles, one of the foremost scholars of the Holocaust, acknowledged that the history of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust is diminished when it is too narrowly focused and non-Jews cannot relate to it. Okay? We ask the world to remember the Holocaust, okay? But as we do that, we have to expect that people are going to remember it on their own terms, okay? That they're going to look at it through their own lenses. And so we want it not just to be not simply a story of Jewish concern, okay, but also a powerful tool to teach universal lessons. Okay? If those lessons had been learned, we wouldn't have had Rwanda or Bosnia
Right.
or Guatemala.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to get that story out.
Yeah.
Right?
And you did that this year. You participated in a tell us about, was this a Miami wide remembrance that
No,
you
this
made the
was
video
actually
for?
an international remembrance. I think it might even be going on right now, where the Combat Anti-Semitism movement, which is a relatively new organization looking to do exactly what its name says, put together, they brought Holocaust survivors to tell their stories, and interspersed were scholars and leaders of the Jewish community who shared their thoughts. So I spoke just very briefly about my feelings that this this effort is so crucial, not just to preserve Jewish history, but to preserve humanity. The mass industrialized murder of 11 million people, right, left a stain on the human race. Right? And it should be a reminder, right, of the ability for a civilized society, as Germany was prior to World War II, right? Um, the depths to which that a civilized society can descend. Right? And I think that if you ask me, do I think that this could happen again? The answer is yes.
Yep.
That is fearful for me to say, but it 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 can, it does.
One of the things that really is quite amazing to me about Yad Vashem, that the Holocaust Memorial in Israel, is for the inside, the main hall, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of it is pre 1939. The vast majority of the information that we get there, the first 3 or 4, you kind of weave through. The first 3 or 4 halls are about the little tiny things that were happening before the war even began, that slowly built up this hatred and this enmity, and led to someone like Hitler and the Nazi Party coming into power. And so when I think about, could this happen again today, if we're waiting for, Kristallnacht, you're right, we're not there. But boy, are we seeing these little hints of anti-Semitism, of hatred, of bigotry? Are we seeing those pop up? Could those snowball and turn into something much greater? I think absolutely.
Absolutely. I want to share one last thing.
Please.
And this, I'm so appreciative of. I'm so appreciative of my colleague, Rabbi Zach Shapiro, who's a Reform rabbi in Los Angeles. Such a good guy. He wrote something today, so I want to give him credit. He asked, how do we best honor those who perished? And this is what he wrote. Each time we light our Shabbat candles, we erase darkness. Each time we sing a Hebrew melody, we defy our oppressors. Each time we attend Torah study, we remind Hitler that he lost. Each time we stand up for human dignity, we destroy ignorance. Each time we plant a tree in Israel, we sow seeds of the future. Each time we teach our children to harness light, we embrace hope. And each moment in time, we stop to remember the victims, we vow never again.
Oh, my goodness. Very, very beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Zach, for that.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you, Rabbi Litwak.
Thank you all. And may we take that memory and hold on to it, and not just hold on to it, but move it forward.
Absolutely. And if you want to learn more about March of the Living or about the Eyewitness Project that Rabbi Litwak mentioned, I put links to both of those in the chat. So just scroll through the chat and you'll be able to find those there. Thank you so much, Rabbi Litwak. By the way, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say this, but Rabbi Litwak's going on a little trip next week because he's going to be Dr. Rabbi Litwak.
Well, yes, I'm finally being honored for 25 years in rabbinate on my anniversary of my 26th anniversary of my ordination. Thank you.
A year late.
I appreciate it.
Mazal Tov.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice to spend time together.
It will. Bye, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.